Welcome to the Bible study, and if this is your first time, please know that there's a full transcript down below. You can read along, and please hit the like and subscribe button. That does help get it out to other people. Leave a comment, let us know where you're listening from, or if you have a question. And with that, let's continue with Malachi 2, 11 through 12, an abomination. Judea has been unfaithful. An abomination has been committed in Israel and in Jerusalem. Judea has desecrated the sanctuary the Lord loves by marrying women who worship a foreign god. As for the man who does this, whoever he may be, may the Lord remove him from the tents of Jacob, even though he brings an offering to the Lord Almighty. As mentioned previously, Malachi probably prophesied during the time of Nehemiah. Although he wasn't a prophet, Nehemiah was just as angry at what was being done in Judea. In those days, also I saw Jews who had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab, and half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, and they could not speak the language of Judea, but only the language of each people. And I confronted them, and I cursed them, and I beat some of them, and pulled out their hair. And I made them take an oath in the name of God, saying, "You shall not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons or yourselves." Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin on account of such women? Among the many nations there was no king like him, and he was beloved by his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, foreign women made even him to sin. Shall we then listen to you and do all this great evil and act treacherously against our God by marrying foreign women? Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab were Judea's neighbors and were the very same people who had opposed the rebuilding of the temple in Ezra and the walls in Nehemiah. Judea has been unfaithful. An abomination has been committed in Israel and in Jerusalem. So when Malachi uses the term Judea, he's referring to everyone in the country, the people, the priests, and the officials. He wasn't targeting out a specific group of people. Apparently these behaviors were rampant across the country. Again, we see the word bagad, which means unfaithful or faithless. Remember, this is a key theme of this portion of Malachi. In this passage, Malachi uses one of the strongest words possible to describe Judea's sin, an abomination. This term is reserved for the worst of evils such as idolatry, witchcraft, or immorality. Judea has desecrated the sanctuary the Lord loves. Again, he is addressing the entire nation. Malachi states that Judea has desecrated, profaned, defiled, and made what is holy unholy in the sanctuary the Lord loves. One is tempted to begin thinking about the temple. However, Malachi is more likely speaking about the nation of Israel itself. Psalm 114:2 tells us, "Judea became his sanctuary, Israel his dominion." Sanctuary is something which is made holy or sacred. Yahweh wouldn't necessarily that he loves the temple, but he did say in Malachi 1:2 that he loved Israel. Yahweh is a holy God. Yahweh made his people holy, and Yahweh calls his people to be holy. In Exodus 19:6, God designated Israel a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And in Deuteronomy 7:6, he says of Israel, "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession." In verse 10, Malachi asks, "Why then are we faithless to one another?" And in this verse states that an abomination has been committed in Israel and Jerusalem. Neither take place in the temple or the altar, but in the nation itself. By marrying women who worship a foreign god. In the Hebrew, this verse literally says that Judea has married the daughter of a foreign god. As we have read, God has chosen Israel to be a holy nation, set apart for God's purpose. In Deuteronomy 7:3-4, God tells the Israelites, "Do not intermarry with them, do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods, and the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you." What God was standing against in Deuteronomy was coming true with Judea. We can see the results of those marriages in the passages we covered in Nehemiah. This is not about racism, but holiness. In Malachi, it was not the race of the women which incurred God's anger, but that the women worshipped a foreign god. God's people always welcomed converted Gentiles to join them in the Passover. It was eaten by the people of Israel who had returned from exile, and also everyone who had joined them and separated himself from the uncleanness of the peoples of the land to worship the Lord, the God of Israel, from Ezra 6:21. Another example is Ruth, who was from Moab, but she had abandoned the Moabite gods and worshipped the God of Israel. In fact, Ruth was the great-grandmother of David. Therefore, she is also in the lineage of Jesus. Also, Moses' wife was a Cushite from Nubia, which is modern-day Sudan. In the New Testament, there are no prohibitions on marrying someone of another race, ethnicity, tribe, or culture, or social group. However, Paul warns us, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common?" While Paul is talking about becoming entangled with idolaters, the principle is the same for marriage. As a Christian, it is not wise to marry those who are not believers. It is extremely difficult on the marriage, and too often we have seen the believer in the marriage eventually fall away. However, if a believer is already married to an unbeliever, Paul did not require a divorce. On the contrary, he encouraged the believer to stay married to win that person to Christ. If any believer has a wife who is an unbeliever and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. And if any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. But if the unbelieving partner separates, let it be so. In such a case, the brother or sister is not bound. That's from 1 Corinthians 7:12-15. As for the man who does this, whoever he may be, may the Lord remove him from the tents of Jacob, even though he brings an offering to the Lord Almighty. This is still Malachi speaking, and he is essentially pronouncing a curse to those who have married contrary to the law of Moses and then thinking they can appease Yahweh with offerings. They are essentially trying to have one foot in two different worlds by entering a relationship with the foreign god and Yahweh. Malachi prays for excommunication of the Israelites who do this. They and their descendants would no longer be part of God's covenant people. Every parent has at one time heard their kids say, "But everyone else is doing it." I used it as well. Of course, my mom would retort, "If everyone else jumped off a cliff, would you too?" Sadly, many Christians are doing exactly that. They are jumping off the spiritual cliff just to fit in. Many are also trying to have one foot in God's kingdom and one foot in the world. The problem is that they find themselves doing the splits as God's kingdom and the world move farther and farther apart. Eventually, we have to jump to one side or the other to keep from falling. Jesus tells us in Matthew 6:24, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." Near the end of Joshua's life, he gave a last speech to the people of Israel. In it, he challenged them, "Choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Ammonites whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now is the time. Either choose to follow God or choose to walk away. No more halfway. As the world is getting crazier and crazier, it becomes more critical to choose your side. We believe God is asking many of you at this time the same thing. Are you standing in the kingdom of God or the world? No more halfway. That's our study for this session. We just pray that God will bless you for reaching out and learning His Word. And with that, we will see you on the next one. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Thank you.